Okay, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Eylon Levy, an Israeli government spokesman. Thank you very much for joining us today. Since declaring war on Israel with the October 7th massacre, Hamas has fired over 9,500 rockets at Israel, including those barrages at central Israel last night. Over 7,100 Israelis have been injured. The IDF has notified 350 families that their loved ones fell in battle. That includes the initial onslaught during the massacre, as well as 59 members of the police force. The revised hostage count in Gaza now stands at least 239, including nationals of at least 27 different countries. Prime Minister Netanyahu has spoken with the president of the Red Cross, Mirjana Spoljaric. He demanded that the Red Cross act for the immediate release of our hostages as demanded by international law. He also demanded that the Red Cross carry out its obligation to visit all our hostages and stolen children to verify their health status. We repeat, there will be no ceasefire without the return of our hostages. Our military action is a vital part of our multi-front effort to bring our hostages back home to safety. Now, moving on to today's operational update. Having encircled Gaza City, the IDF is now moving deep inside the urban area to dismantle the terror state responsible for October 7th. We are intensifying pressure on Hamas and have eliminated thousands of terrorists above ground and below them. Among them, the masterminds of the October 7th massacre. Today, the IDF and Shin Bet announced an airstrike killed weapons mastermind Mosen Abu Zina, Hamas's head of weapons and industries. The late Mr. Abu Zina played a key role in developing the Hamas rockets and strategic weapons that have terrorized our people for the past 2 decades. We continue to work closely with international partners and show them the horrors of October 7th. The Prime Minister is in continuous contact with US President Joe Biden. They speak regularly and have done so over a dozen times since the October 7th massacre. We appreciate the President's support, that of the US administration and the American people. As the Prime Minister said yesterday, meeting special forces, we are learning from the American-led coalition's fight against ISIS in dense urban areas and learning lessons from the Battle of Fallujah in 2016. The Americans are amazed at what we have achieved. In the north, Israel will continue defending its northern border from Hezbollah aggression. We do not accept a reality in which Hezbollah and its allies attack our people, and we will continue to respond forcefully to any such attack. We reiterate our warning to Hezbollah. If it decides to enter this war, it will be making the mistake of a lifetime. In Gaza, we are pushing ahead with our 3 goals: eliminating Hamas, bringing the hostages home, and restoring security to Israel. Hamas still poses a mortal threat, and I refer you to the words that the Hamas spokesman kindly told the New York Times today, and I quote, "I hope that the state of war with Israel will become permanent on all the borders and that the Arab world will stand with us." That is the threat we are facing, a terror group that is planning a state of war becoming permanent on our borders. We will eliminate that threat by eliminating Hamas, further to our obligations under international law. Just like British troops marching through Nazi Germany in 1945, Israeli forces continue to uncover evidence of Hamas war crimes, and specifically Hamas's unlawful and immoral strategy of embedding itself in civilian areas, seeking to maximize civilian casualties as propaganda fodder. Just yesterday, the IDF exposed tunnels that literally went through people's living rooms, concealed rocket launchers and weapons in a school, a tunnel shaft next to an amusement park, over 50 rockets ready for launch from inside a youth movement compound, and most shockingly, a rocket launch site operated from inside a mosque. We will continue exposing and defending ourselves from Hamas's war crimes. On the humanitarian front, we continue to urge residents of northern Gaza to complete the evacuation of the north temporarily for their own safety. We are often asked, what do we expect civilians to do who haven't gotten out of harm's way? The answer is, please get out of harm's way. For the 4th day in a row, the IDF has operated a humanitarian corridor for civilians to evacuate southwards along the Salahuddin Road, a corridor that Hamas shamefully attacked in recent days. We can report that thousands of civilians took advantage of that humanitarian corridor today. That's despite Hamas's despicable strategy of trying to keep them in the north as human shields. Israel is doing everything it can to keep Palestinian civilians out of harm's way. Hamas is doing everything it can to keep them there, and we are combating those efforts. When this war war ends with the inevitable defeat of Hamas, they will, of course, be able to return. An update on humanitarian aid. Latest figures from Kogat are 692 humanitarian aid trucks have entered the Gaza Strip since the October 7th massacre, including 4,070 tons of food, 1,970 tons of medical equipment, and 1,200 tons of water. Gaza had food before Hamas launched this war. It still has food. It has sufficient food reserves for the near future. There is no food shortage in the Gaza Strip. Israel continues to provide the Gaza Strip with millions of litres of water a day through 2 pipes. This is in addition to the 90% of Gaza's water consumption, which is locally sourced from treated groundwater and desalination. We have been enhancing our screening capabilities to facilitate more trucks entering through the Rafah border crossing, and we know that the extent of humanitarian aid being delivered is still influenced in part by the capacity of international agencies in Gaza to receive the aid and deliver it to civilians. Now, as in every briefing, I want to draw attention to one of our 239 hostages in Gaza. This is Emilia Aloni. She is 5.5 years old, small enough that you still count the and a half. An amazing little girl who captures the heart of everyone who knows her. She is sweet, intelligent, and curious. Whether cooking muffins, piecing together puzzles, or embarking on dress-up adventures, Emilia is a little bundle of joy. On October 7th, she was on a family holiday in Kibbutz Nir Oz with relatives. Hamas death squads raided their home and abducted Emilia, together with her mother, aunt, uncle, and twin cousins. They were cruelly taken from the safety of their home. An entire family abducted into the Gaza Strip. It is a tragedy and a crime beyond words. We urge the international community and all individuals of conscience to apply all possible pressure on Hamas and its supporters to secure the immediate and unconditional return of our hostages. We'll now take your questions. If any of you have questions, please put your hand up or type questions into the chat. While we're waiting, a reminder that if you have questions, looking for verifications, or want to contact any various officials and sources, please do contact us at desk@pressoffice.co.il, desk@pressoffice.co.il, or +972 53 303 3635. If you get those questions in advance, we can make sure that we have the relevant information for you. We'll now move to questions. Do we have Jim Williams? Ultimately, Hamas must grant access to the Red Cross to see our citizens, but we are expecting the Red Cross to put more pressure on Hamas in order to be able to see our abducted citizens. There is more pressure that can be put. I'll refer you to many ways in which the Red Cross has in fact been in some ways complicit with Hamas's strategy of using human shields. For example, surrounding the question of hospitals, we've seen the Red Cross tweeting, hospitals must be protected. That is true. Under international law, medical units may not be used, may not be attacked. Medical units may not be used to shield military targets, and to the extent that they are used to shield military targets, they may become legitimate targets under international law as long as the army that is defending itself provides sufficient warning. So we know that the International Red Cross plays a very important role, and we think that there is a lot more room for the Red Cross to put pressure on Hamas and for international pressure to be placed on Hamas and its supporters to give access to the Red Cross so that it can see our hostages. David from JNF. JNS, sorry, not the JNF. We reiterate it is still very premature to talk about the day after Hamas scenarios. I wish the day after Hamas were next week, but this is probably going to take longer. Talking about the day after scenarios at the moment is like discussing the Marshall Plan before the Battle of Stalingrad. We're exploring several contingencies together with our international partners for what the day after will look like. The common denominator, of course, being that the Gaza Strip must be demilitarized. It must never again become the terror nest that has seen tens of thousands of rockets launched at us in recent years, and of course the death squads that emerged on October 7th, but these are still very early days and we're having fruitful conversations with our international partners. Any other questions?
Emmett, CBS.
Emmett from CBS, please. On your first question, at the moment we are urging civilians to get out of harm's way to the south of the Gaza Strip for their safety. That is part of our obligation under international law to do what we can to get civilians out of harm's way. It is regrettable that some people are choosing to spin Israel's compliance with its obligations under international law to accuse Israel of trying to displace those civilians. In Israel, we have our own problem of internally displaced persons, 250,000 people who have been evacuated, including from Sderot, including from Kiryat Shmona, the sick, the elderly. It's difficult, but we have to get them out of harm's way, and we expect that as soon as this war is over and ends with the defeat of Hamas and the terror infrastructure that it has built under Gaza, those people will be able to return. I'll refer you on your second question to my previous answer. It is still very premature to talk about what the day after is going to look like. This is a war that Hamas launched on us with the October 7th massacre, not a war that Israel initiated. We are responding to that vicious attack on October 7th and the ongoing firing of rockets against our people. And of course, we will continue to work with international partners to make sure that whatever happens the day after Hamas, the Gaza Strip can never again be taken over by terror groups able to rain terror on our people. Next question, please. Coach. This is a press briefing, not a philosophy symposium, but I'll see what I can do. Sorry, could you repeat the first question? I don't think I understood it. First of all, the question about the Palestinian refugees, our position is these people are not refugees. There is an international definition for all refugees in the world, and then the UN preserves a special definition just for Palestinians. It means that a Palestinian born now in the Gaza Strip is classified as a refugee, even though they were not displaced from anywhere. Their parents were not displaced, their grandparents were not displaced, and their great-grandparents were not displaced. But the United Nations has maintained a separate definition in a manner that has cultivated the Palestinians' irredentist demands to replace the state of Israel rather than living next to it. It is deeply regrettable that instead of helping people inside the Gaza Strip to build permanent homes and build their lives there, the United Nations is in effect telling over half of the population of Gaza that it is not their home, and somewhere over the rainbow in Israel they will one day be able to return. We of course condemn those activities by UNRWA. As for whether anyone will enter from Israel proper, the answer is no. On October 7th, Hamas literally destroyed the only pedestrian crossing with Israel. On the morning of October 7th, there was the Erez crossing. It had been used for years to bring Gazan workers into Israel where they could earn an honest wage. That had been used to bring in people for medical treatment in Israeli hospitals to access the high-quality care they couldn't get inside Gaza. And on October 7th, Hamas death squads went in and massacred everyone they saw, the people who were responsible for facilitating that humanitarian movement of people through the Erez crossing. That crossing no longer exists. That is no longer an option. Next question, please.
Sander from NOS.
Sander from NOS, please. Sure. The first question, if I understood correctly, about international aid, our position from the very beginning has been clear. Israel wants to see humanitarian aid reach the people of the Gaza Strip through the Rafah border crossing with Egypt. Food, water, medicine, absolutely fine by us. It is important that it reach the people of Gaza on one condition, that it not reach Hamas terrorists and not be used to rearm their military machine. That is our obligation under international law, to facilitate the provision of life-saving humanitarian aid necessary for the survival of the civilian population by neutral third parties, inasmuch as we have assurances that they will not be diverted to the enemy's war machine. So we're happy for humanitarian aid to continue entering through Rafah. On the ceasefire question, I'll refer you again to the Prime Minister's remarks. There will be no ceasefire, no matter how temporary, without a return of hostages. As for small tactical pauses, an hour here, an hour there, in order to let humanitarian aid in or individual hostages out, that's something we've done before, something we will consider again. I'll note just on a point of geography, at the moment the IDF is focusing its efforts on thumping Hamas in the north of the Gaza Strip. We've urged residents to move to the south. The aid is entering from the Rafah border crossing, which is the southern tip of the Gaza Strip. That is where we have designated a humanitarian zone for Palestinians who have been displaced from the north. So we're continuing with our efforts to thump Hamas in the north, to increase the provision of humanitarian aid in the south. We see these two going completely hand in hand, and in fact in recent days we've been increasing humanitarian aid and increasing the pressure on Hamas in the north. I will address, however, a certain ambiguity around the question of ceasefire. This war will end with the ultimate defeat of Hamas. That is the only way that this war can end, with a total Israeli victory, because we will not go back to a world in which Hamas is able to invade us at will and massacre our people. We're not going back to 6 a.m. on October 7th, and we will continue at full force until we have destroyed the entirety of Hamas's military and governing machine inside the Gaza Strip. Any other questions?
One last question. From Patrick. Al Jazeera is reporting negotiations for the release of hostages against one or 2 days. 1 or 2 days. Oh, 1 or 2 days of ceasefire. Could you confirm?
I'm not going to comment on any sensitive negotiations that may be taking place to secure the release of our hostages. We are, of course, making every effort to do so, both diplomatic pressure and military pressure on Hamas inside the Gaza Strip. Okay, if those are all the questions we have, thank you very much. Hopefully we'll see you same time tomorrow. Everyone, please keep safe and have a good evening. Thank you very much. Oh, we have one more question. Okay. Send us, if you have a specific query, send us a message and we'll get back to you. As I said, our policy from day one of this war has been very clear. We support the provision of humanitarian aid to the Palestinian civilians in the Gaza Strip through the Rafah border crossing with Egypt, as long as we are assured that is not reaching Hamas's war machine. And we have been making efforts to increase the provision of humanitarian aid, increasing our ability to screen it to make sure Hamas is not exploiting the international community's goodwill in order to rearm, and that remains our policy. Okay, thank you very much, everyone. Have a good evening. Thank you. Okay.